The following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines. Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Hi, welcome back. We have had some really good times the last couple of podcasts with John Longworth and some folks that have been here to honor him primarily, roast him a little bit, and we're learning some things. And we've been talking about some themes that might help you as a sports minister in a local church to figure out how can you last as long as John has. We're celebrating his 20th anniversary as a sport, recreation, and fitness minister. I think his official title at the church is Recreation and Senior Adult Minister. So we're trying to learn some things here, and so far we've kind of cherry picked on some things that you've got to be authentic, you got to be committed to the gospel, you got to have a little bit of a sense of humor, and you've got to make it encouraging and affirming and positive and fun. But we started out with some of this, and we said that about 10% retire as a sports minister, those that start. And so where's that other 90% going? And one of the things that causes some difficulty sometimes is when senior pastors change. And Steve, this may be interesting to you as someone who serves as a volunteer at the church. I know David's aware of this stuff, that it is rare for a sports and rec pastor to last through a second senior pastorate. It's about 50-50. It's almost 100% that they last through the person that hired them. Because if a senior pastor hired them, they're probably not going to fire them because they're admitting either they were wrong in the hiring or the firing. So they go to the second one. And about 50% last that during that whole tenure of the second senior pastor. It is extremely rare, again, in that 10 to 20% of that lasts through a third into a fourth senior pastorate. Now, that doesn't mean there's good people and bad people, a bad senior pastor or a bad sports minister. Some of it's just age. If somebody's been through 3 senior pastors, they're older. It's time to retire. But sometimes it comes down to other things. Focus, emphasis, passions. And as much as we hate to admit it, some pastors or sports ministers, they're really into disciples, making disciples, that whole discipleship thing. And others are evangelism. And we think, well, they should go together. Well, yeah, but sometimes it's even that, how do we go through any of that? And so, John, I'm going to turn to you a little bit. And you're now going to see a fourth senior pastor. And that is extremely, extremely rare. Talk to the young person out there that's just getting started, or they may have just gotten a second senior pastor. In fact, we just had one of your colleagues that 20 years, and it's the first time now he's going to have to serve under a new senior pastor after 20 years. What words of wisdom or insight do you have for people?
Greg, that's in some ways a difficult question to answer because I don't know that I went into the tenure of any of our senior pastors thinking, how am I going to outlast this one? I mean, that's just not something that I think about. But it probably comes down to a couple of things. One is you have to be yourself You have to be authentic to who you are and your calling and your passion, and trust the Lord to take care of that. I don't know that I've ever really worried about what this pastor or this lay leader or whoever is going to think of me, because as we talked about when Carla was on, my life verse is 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. And so maybe, I don't think it's not naivety on my part, but I've I've believed that, and I've tried to honor that, and I've felt as if the Lord closes this door, he'll open another one. I just need to be faithful to the calling that he's placed on my life. So there's not been a great emphasis on, how do I need to adjust what I do or who I am because of who my shepherd is. I just try to be faithful to who I am in Christ, what he's called me to do, and the role that he's placed me in here at this church. I would answer your question in one way by saying this: I am just so incredibly grateful to the people of Germantown Baptist Church who have been willing to put up with me for 20 years. I mean, they have been incredibly gracious and loving, and I honestly don't think there's a better church that anybody could serve at. The lay leaders like Steve and staff members that we've had the opportunity to work with and serve alongside over the years. God's just done some incredible things here. And as I mentioned earlier, in one of the other segments, I have learned and grown as a result of sitting under the leadership of each of the other 3 senior pastors that I've served with. So I'm grateful for that. I think one thing that has helped me is just a reminder over and over again to both love and serve the Lord and love and serve the people. And if we do those things, it helps us keep everything in perspective, and helps us keep the main thing the main thing. It helps us to keep those priorities aligned.
Well, let's keep going on this a little bit, because I want you to be there for another 20 years, so you do have to be careful how you answer this. But there's obviously, you've got 4 people, you're going to come up on your 4th, and they all have probably had a little different perspective or a little approach to things. And what I've noticed, and one of the things when we get consulted at CSRM to come in and help churches navigate these waters, what we recognize is that a pastor is hired, and here he is right in this continuum. And then their passion takes them this direction. And then the further they go this way, the more the people on this end feel like their needs aren't being met or a little neglected. And so then when this pastor leaves, they hire somebody that's way over here because that's who's crying for need. And now immediately these people they have been served, and now they're not being served. And so you can see it's not a good person, bad person, but it's just a normal way of going about it. And these people have different emphasis, they have different styles, they have different visions, or some don't have any vision, and they just are, down to the brass tacks of nailing things down. Any insight, John, on how you deal with different personalities or different passions or strengths? How do you navigate those waters?
Yeah, I think as you have the opportunity and get to know the pastor that you're serving under, serving with, you have to ask yourself questions about his priorities, his vision. What does he want to see expressed in the life of the church? And once you know that, you begin to ask yourself, how do I bring that to life in this ministry? The expectation is that the senior pastor will have a vision that the Lord gives him. And so it's incumbent upon us as staff members serving with and serving under him to bring life to that vision. And there are different ways you do that in different ministries. And so you just have to know what his priorities are, what his vision is. And then it's helpful to know what his personality and his leadership style and management skills are. And in some ways you have to adapt to some of that. Some require more communication than others. Some want to be more hands-on or direct than others. And you learn to adjust as necessary, or as much as you believe you can or should do. But yeah, you have to make accommodation because they all bring strengths and weaknesses. They all bring different passions and vision and expectations. And so the staff member has to, or should, if he's wise, think through those things and ask himself, how can I best serve the Lord and this church under the leadership of this pastor? And I think another thing that's important to remember is that, as difficult sometimes as it is for a staff member to say this or express this, we all serve at the pleasure of the senior pastor. David Waddell asked me a question in an interview that he had before I joined the staff. And frankly, it was something that maybe I should have prepared for, but I was completely unprepared when he asked this question because we hadn't really talked about it, and I didn't know what his goals for this ministry were. But when I joined as the associate pastor of recreation, we interviewed, he said, "John, what are your three goals?" Well, I tried to hide that deer in the headline look as best I could, but I immediately said, without knowing the ministry more than I do, I would say I have three goals right now. And so I prefaced my answer by saying, I think those three goals probably still apply to not just myself, but for any staff member at any church, in any role. And that is, one, David, I want to be the man that God has called me to be. I want to be obedient to what he's asking me to do. So I want to be God's man. Two, I want to make decisions that reflect well on this ministry and this church. So as I lead this ministry or this area of the ministry, I want that 1 Corinthians 10:31 verse to be lived out in me. And I want to point people to Jesus, and I want the church to grow and to have that positive reflection on the church. And then three is make you look good. That answer surprised David, but here's what I meant by saying that. If we're working and serving in a way that makes, where we're effective in what we're doing, then that affirms his decision to bring me on board as a staff member. And so if I'm doing those three things with the next senior pastor, if I'm being the man that God's called me to be, if I'm pointing people to Jesus and having kingdom impact and impact on the church, and then if I'm making him look good, if the things I do affirm the relationship that we have and the role that I have on staff, then I think we accomplish what any pastor would want of any staff member.
Excellent. Steve, having heard my question and John's response, and you've been kind of that key volunteer, we call them a local missionary. You're actually a local missionary to your community. What do you hear? How can you help the young or growing sports minister from your perspective as that key volunteer?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that John's answer was given in great humility, and I do appreciate that about John, even though we share a lot in humor and sarcasm. He's also a man of great humility, and there are things that he did not say that he could have, that I'll say, that I think have contributed to his success. Number one, John, even though he does follow the leadership and vision of the senior pastor, he also has a vision for the job he does. And I think you've heard him talk about the answer he gave to David on the three key things. And I don't think in the years I've known John, I've ever seen him stray from it, that he stayed that course. And in the business world, the old saying is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And from that standpoint, John has been successful and survived because it ain't broke. John knows what that ministry is supposed to be and what God has called him to do at that church, and he stayed that course. And we've had challenges, and John also wears a lot of different hats because of the challenges we've experienced at the church. But I've never seen him waver. Yeah, we joked earlier about our mission trips together when I asked John to go with me down to Belize to work on sports ministry. The answer was yes, because he believes that sharing the gospel to the nations is just as important as it is sharing it in that gym. And his pastoral leadership. We have an event that is a huge event at Germantown Baptist that happens every holiday season that John spearheads, and it is a volunteer-driven event, and it takes a lot of man hours to put on this living nativity. And what I respect about John's leadership is that even though he's kind and helpful, the expectation is there. When I tell him that I'm going to be there at a certain time, he expects that. And when I tell him that I'm going to be doing a certain thing, he expects that. So there's an equal commitment, and John has a great ability, which I think is a skill set that I don't, I having never been a pastor, I don't know about the skill set of a lot of pastors, but John has a skill set that allows him to interact with laymen in a special way because he's been on that side in the business world, and he understands the challenges that I go through every day. And I think that's a gift. I think that's something that John has. But to answer your question, Greg, I think as a believer of the Word, it's not John's job solely to do that. Our job as the congregation is to be the hands and feet of Jesus. The sharing of the gospel and making disciples, Acts 1:8 and the Great Commission both, they don't say if you are a pastor, you should do these things. It says if we are followers of Jesus Christ, we should do those things. So John, as a leader, sets those expectations for us as the lay leadership, and it's our job to kind of take that ball and run with it.
David, what would you like to ask John or say to John?
Well, I was going to tell the story of the three things that he shared, but he beat me to the punch. But I will share it this way. A few years ago, um, I was hired by the university with one department chair, went through a few interims, and then we brought in a new department chair. And I had lunch with the new chair, and he said, what do you do for the department? What can I count on you for? And I said, well, three things. I'm going to be the best man that I can be, the one that God has designed. I'm going to do whatever I can to make the university success, and I'm going to make you look good. So, John, you think we forget the things you say, but you influence down, you influence to the sides, and you influence up. And that line helped me greatly because I didn't get the deer in headlight look from my new chair, but I got this pleasing look. And the only problem with that is since then I've had to make him look good. And oh wait, this is being taped. Um, can we edit that one out? No, he's a good guy, but John, your influence goes far beyond. I had that influence explained once that when a rock hits the water, it makes an initial splash, but that the ripples, you can watch it on a lake, they just keep going and going. And I'll say it this way: when you get to heaven, I think you're going to have people on a sixth and seventh, the seven levels of knowing Kevin Bacon is there. I think you're going to have 7, 11, 15 layers of people that were influenced by you, who influenced someone, who influenced someone, who influenced someone. It will take a heavenly calculator to figure out the work that you've done in this life.
What we call in the CSRM world producing, reproducing, reproducers. And that's so true of you, John. John, we're down to our last couple minutes here, and what else would you have to say to someone who says, I want to celebrate a 20th anniversary as a sports minister? What would you say to them?
pray a lot. There's a lot of truth to that. I don't know what I would add other than, we've talked about the importance of surrounding yourself with good people, people who have strengths in areas where you have weakness, being willing to step out of the spotlight and allow others to shine. Talked about the importance of mission and ministry and keeping the main thing, prioritizing, breaking down barriers and building relationships in order to advance the gospel. If you have a purpose, if you have a mission, if you have something that keeps you going, that keeps you engaged day after day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year, that along with the calling of God on your life and having fun doing it, I think those are the things that keep any of us committed and growing and going year after year. Just that calling of God on your life, that passion, that drive, that purpose, and working with people that you enjoy working around and with, and keeping it fun, keeping it enjoyable. Those are the things I've tried to do over the past 20 years. Sometimes I'm more successful at those things than others, and you all have been kind and have said some nice things, but I want to cover up Steve right now, but there's probably quite a number of things that I've done poorly, or mistakes that have been made. And I think it's important when we make those mistakes to recognize those and grow from them, learn from them. And, don't be afraid to fail. That's one of the things that David, among others, instilled in me years and years and years ago. If you're afraid to fail, you're not going to try new things. You're not going to do anything differently. And in today's world, if we're afraid to try something new or different in any area of ministry, we're not going to be as effective as we can or should be. And I think there needs to be that willingness to step out of our comfort zones and do things we've never done before. I always want to be open to new ideas. And if somebody walked into my office this afternoon and said, John, I have an idea for this. We can reach people for Jesus by playing tiddlywinks in the lobby on Thursday afternoons. Well, I'm going to ask some questions. How specifically do you intend to do that? And what we're going to delve into that. But if I'm convinced that we can win people for Jesus, or make a difference in their lives, or help them look more like Jesus by playing tiddlywinks in the office, in the lobby, then we'll seriously consider doing that. I just think we have to be open to new ideas, and not just do things the way we've always done them. Because if that's the case, we're probably destined to fail.
Very, very good. Very, very good. I would encourage, if this is the first podcast that you've listened to or watched, I would ask you to go to our archives and look back. There's been some wisdom coming through all of them today, because we're learning from somebody today who has done it and done it well. And that's part of the reason why he could celebrate a 20th anniversary. And hopefully there's a 30th and on beyond that. We're hoping, John, because we know that what you have done will continue to be done, and done even better. And we hope that you'll have many more anniversaries, because there will be more people in the kingdom because of what you have done, and probably more importantly, who you are. And so we celebrate with you. We love you. We appreciate you. Steve and Dave, thanks for being with us during this time. Any last quick word from either one of you?
Thanks, Greg and David, for inviting me. I love this man. I love his heart. And most of all, I agree with what you just said, Greg, that there will be crowns for him in heaven because of the commitment he made to sharing the gospel and doing it unwaveringly. So, John, congratulations on 20 years.
Yep.
Thank you, Steve.
I think John would agree with me on this too, that some of those crowns are because John put up with you and me, Steve. So.
And all God's people said amen.
I'll just say two things. Happy anniversary. And I'll steal one of John Longworth's famous lines. A good time was had by all.
You know, Greg, if I can, I'd just like to say thank you to you and Steve and David and Carla. It wasn't expecting any of this, but I'm grateful that they've honored me with their presence here today. And if I could add one thing, it's that to a large extent, outside of God's call and his favor, to a large extent, I'm still here serving at the same church after 20 years because of people like Greg Linville and David Waddell and others who have invested in me and pushed and prodded and encouraged and equipped me to be an effective leader. People like Carla, who I've had the privilege of serving with and leading in some ways, but we've done ministry together, and she was part of the team. And you surround yourself with a good team. And then people like Steve, those lay leaders who are willing to give up their time, their talents, their resources to serve in ministry. So nobody reaches a point like this without all of those people. And of course, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, a wife and a family who have stood by my side and supported me in ministry, and have put up with the highs and lows of ministry and serving at a church. And then the church itself, people that have been willing to put up with someone like me for as long as they have. I'm grateful. And I'm humbled and honored to have been here, and look forward to, hopefully God's not through with me yet. And as long as he wants to use me, I want to be available to be used by him.
Very good. And again, thanks to each of you. Those that are listening, get to the archives for the other ones. And of course, CSRM has lots of resources. Just get on the website, find the books, find the podcasts, find the Tuesday talks, find everything you can find, and come back next time. And we're going to look forward to talking to you then. Thank you, man, and goodbye.
CSRM's podcasts are a resource provided by the Association of Church Sports and Recreation Ministries and its production house, Overwhelming Victory Flicks. This episode was produced by Dr. Greg Linville and edited by Andrew Fouts. For more information about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.